And I'm happy tech entrepreneur, an educator, and an operator. So I put together a brief presentation that really just is focused on what I think are kind of the biggest things that I've learned in working in innovation, and how to get people into the right mindset, frameworks, and skill sets, and then just some key insights on the right way to go about it and the things to avoid. It shouldn't be too long. It'd probably take me 15, 20 minutes to talk through it, but I don't know the normal structure and format here, but at any point, if you have a question, it seems like a small enough group, feel free to just unmute and chime in, and we can make this hopefully an interactive discussion. I know I learn a lot more through deep conversation than I do just listening to someone blab. So
maybe just give some context, Sean. We normally listen maybe about 20, 25 minutes, and then we have a deeper conversation with Q&A from the audience and myself asking questions. So we want to make sure that you get a chance to finish your presentation at the pace you want, and then we'll come at you and ask you more questions perhaps than maybe you want, but we'll ask you good questions.
Perfect. It's your game. I'm just here to play.
Excellent.
So I'll start by sharing my screen, and make sure everyone can see my screen.
Yes, we do.
Great. So as I said, the context of this is I just wanted to really roll up and synthesize the key insights and learnings from my experience and from my team's experience in building close to 100 corporate ventures, plus my own collective experience from building my own companies. I'll give you a little bit of background on myself. As I said, I've been an entrepreneur my entire life. I didn't choose it; it chose me. I have started 5 technology companies in Silicon Valley. I've had 3 successful exits and a couple of really expensive and valuable learning experiences. I went from being a serial tech entrepreneur, and by the way, those startups have been in a wide variety of industries and verticals. I never really fell on one particular industry over another. I always just fell in love with the promise of how you could leverage technology to make the world a better place, and was very fortunate to partner with great technical co-founders. I am not a techie in the traditional sense. I'm not a coder. I like to make the joke that I can't even spell HTML. But what I can do and have done is translate that technology into solving real problems for people. And so I've always been the overpaid translator between humans and engineers, as I like to say. And so that's always been my role. So I'm very much focused on commercialization, go-to-market, sales, marketing, value propositions, business models, value exchange through pricing structures, identifying where the most value can be provided with a piece of technology, how to focus on customer problems over products and technology, markets and people. And that's been my area. So I went from being a serial tech entrepreneur to a tech investor. I launched a series of funds called GrowthX, which had a very unique structure. The biggest problem that I saw in going from being a tech entrepreneur to a tech investor to a frustrated tech investor was companies weren't succeeding, not because they couldn't make the products or the technology work. They weren't succeeding because they couldn't get adoption for their products and services in the market. And I think the first key insight that I like to share with the world is it's not innovative if it's not adopted. Because if people don't use and get value from what you create, it's not, to me, a true innovation. There has to be a practical connection between your idea and solving deep, meaningful, valuable problems for people. So when I launched my funds, I created a different LP structure that allowed us not to just invest money in a company, but also invest people in helping those companies find product market fit. Which for me, the definition is you need a happy cohort of early customers that will tell the world how much better off they are with you than without you, so that you can leverage that to scale in any given area so that you can stay alive. Most startups are just as one of my mentors, Steve Blank, would say, they're just a temporary business in search of a business model. My version of that is that a startup is a stranger in a strange place with a strange offering, going to other strangers and asking them to do strange things with them. And if you think about it that way, your entire mindset and your approach to the market is very different than what you might be used to if you come from a known world with an existing business and an existing brand and a history with an existing customer base. And so that brings in one of the other key insights I'll talk about in a couple of minutes, called stage relevancy, the importance of having stage relevant humans that understand this, have experienced it, and know how to navigate through that phase or stage of taking something someplace new, which has nothing to do with the product or the market. It has to do with that dynamic of taking something someplace new, whether that's a new product to a new market, a new product to an existing market, or an existing product or idea to a new market. In my view, the rules are the same, the behaviors, the steps, the questions that need to be constructed in the form of a hypothesis and validated or iterated on until they are validated aren't any different. So I built a product market fit accelerator that allowed me to invest the equal amount of human capital as physical capital into a company to help them find that product market fit. And as a result, we have experienced outsized returns and outperformed the Silicon Valley seed stage venture market significantly. And as a result, was able to begin licensing that methodology to different funds, to governments, including up in Calgary. Alberta Innovates for our Calgary guy there. And around the world to different accelerators and incubators as a way to help them find the truth about where their products fit in the market, create functional learning teams in pursuit of impact and profitability. And so that worked really well. And then I started a school called GrowthX Academy. I heard a Kuala Lumpur mentioned there. There's a school in KL with Ganesh Banga as a partner, as well as Silicon Valley and some other markets, and it's online as well, that trains people to work in the non-tech roles in startups, which are just as vital as the tech roles. Then I got kind of dragged into corporate innovation as I was helping my portfolio of companies, about 143 different companies, most of which were selling into enterprises. I was helping them run proof of concepts and get real traction early with these enterprises. Started to uncover that corporates had the same problems. Anytime they tried to commercialize a new idea, they had a very similar failure rate. Most of these things fail for the same reasons. And so I started to apply my framework to helping corporates do the same thing, commercialize new innovations. And as I was focused on the commercialization side, I encountered this company, U+, which was a corporate venture builder based in Europe that had been doing this for quite a long time. And what was interesting was, coming from the Valley, corporate venturing was not a very mature thing. And the reason is that the startup ecosystem in the US is very robust, as we all know. And so when most corporates think about innovation, they think about partnering with innovative companies outside of their ecosystem and leveraging those in some way or shape or form, either building alongside them, buying from them, investing in them, partnering with them. But in Europe and the Middle East, where U+ had a really strong presence, that startup ecosystem is not as robust. And as a result, companies think about innovation first from inside out as opposed to outside in, typically. So they were able to build a model and a structure to deliver full startup teams that would be embedded inside of these organizations to help them do very similar things, although their focus was very much on the product and the design and the technology, whereas mine was on the commercialization. And so I built a good relationship with the founder. He offered me an opportunity to acquire half the company and help him grow it and marry my commercialization framework with their product tech and design business. And since then, it's gone very well. We've grown the company 5x in the last 2 years and are on a pretty good trajectory. Obviously, the pandemic has accelerated digital transformation for all of us. So that's certainly been a contributing factor. But that's sort of how I arrived where I am and what I'm doing now. We've built close to 90 or almost close to 100 now corporate ventures that have become full startups that either have been spun out or added to a certain business or operated as a separate unit across a wide variety of industry sectors and verticals. And I'm not here to promote Youth Plus. I'm just giving you a background on everything that's gone into these insights that I'm going to share with you in terms of what we've learned. And I think the biggest thing is most innovations fail. In the startup world, 80% of seed stage funded startups do not get to break even or another round of funding. And 8 of the top 10 reasons why that happens have to do with markets and people, not products and technology. Yet, most of the founders are very much focused on their product or their technology. They sit behind their screen and they develop something because they're in love with it, not necessarily because they found a key problem to solve. And there's very much a similar mindset in the corporate environment. They've got an idea, they play with that idea inside, they invest a lot of time, money, and resources in it. Then they take it out only to find out that it's not what people wanted. And then, like a lot of startups, but even more so, their inability to adapt, pivot, or change based on what they learn is another contributing factor to why they fail. And then another is lack of stakeholder support because they're not great at telling the innovation story or communicating that to the stakeholders inside to get the appropriate resources and runway they need to continue to pursue it. And there's 4 primary reasons for that. They don't have experience in taking something someplace new. Most of the wonderful people that grow and optimize and operate these big entities were not entrepreneurs and were not there at the beginning. Most of the entrepreneurs that were building these companies are no longer there. They're either dead or retired, or they've moved on to something else. And then it's handed off to great operators. But those operators operate within fixed mindset environments where mistakes are not necessarily tolerated. They don't have the right skill set for building new businesses versus building new products. A really good example is what I often see is especially around technology. A corporation will say, we want to build a new tech product, and they may not be a tech company. They'll go to their internal IT teams and ask them for help. And those internal IT teams are made up of, again, wonderful people, but those people are usually very good at supporting existing things, not building new things. And they're several degrees removed from the markets and the customers. And as a result, they struggle in being iterative, flexible, lean in their approaches, rapidly testing and iterating different ideas. They overplan, they overbuild, they over-engineer. And oftentimes they have limited resources to respond to the needs of the market in the fashion that's required to actually get true adoption. And then they lack a framework. they don't have a framework for executing on these things. So it's very hard for them to know what to do next. It's very difficult for them to be able to show quick wins to the stakeholders inside the organization who also have fixed mindsets and aren't used to this and don't know how to measure it. So they're often measured by traditional business metrics, when the most important metrics at the early stages are learning metrics, because learning will lead to adoption, which will ultimately lead to revenue. They're asked for business plans and forecasts. They're asked for revenue metrics as opposed to traction metrics. And all of those things create all the challenges associated with why Nielsen says 30,000 products are launched every year and less than 5% last 3 years in the market. So philosophically, we've learned about 4 key things that we try to accomplish anytime we enter a new venture or take a new idea out. The first is, and I think this is the most important one, and this speaks to the mindset, excuse me, component of where success comes from. It's to find the truth about where a product fits in the market, if it does at all, and what to do about it. We don't know what we don't know yet. We construct a hypothesis around a use case, a business model, a value proposition, how to position ourselves against everything else that's going on in the market, and then how to affect and create change with our customers. Because at the end of the day, your competition with a new idea is not some other vendor or some other way of doing things even. It is the lack of willingness or ability for someone to make change, because that's what you're asking them to do. You're asking them to change behaviors, workflows, mindsets. And so you have to give them a very compelling reason to do that. And you also have to make it very easy. We live in the Amazon economy. And Amazon, to me, is not the most valuable company in the world because of what they make. They're the most valuable company in the world because of what they make easy. And the fastest way to create change for anyone is to reduce barriers to make that change. Our customers don't want more work, they want less. And the biggest challenge is they don't want to tell you the truth because it creates conflict and or more work. So how you approach them to get them to tell you the objective, unbiased truth is very different. And there's a unique skill set required for that, and a collection of historical experiences that help you do that well. And then once you get that truth, you need to know how to learn from it. So the second piece is to create what I call a functional learning organization. I'm not sold on the idea of overall cultural transformation at this stage. Taking a pragmatic approach, coming from a world where we have limited time, money, and resources to find our truth. I'm more about creating functional learning. How can you learn quickly, create small, strategic, quick wins that build momentum, boost morale, and tell the story necessary to continue to get the support you need to move forward. And then we need to do those things with an eye on impact and profitability. If it's a social venture or an impact venture, you need to be able to measure that impact as you go and show indications of how you can scale that impact over time. The same goes with profitability. You need to have some metrics that show that, no, you're not going to be profitable right away, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. But you do have to show a path. What's the cost to acquire a customer today and the customer lifetime value potential versus what it might be in a year or two, based on what you're learning. And then we believe, and what we found with our teams, whether it's in my portfolio of startups or the ones I've started or with our corporate clients now, that you can fundamentally transform teams in the way they work through this experience and through this approach. And to me, the transformation comes after the success, not before. this gives you sort of a sense of how we operationalize innovation inside of an organization. For me, it's very important to give people visual representations and almost productize the various steps in the process, because I think it helps people better understand and budget for these types of things. One of the things I've learned as the front end selling CEO all these years is that you have to sell to people the way they're used to buying, whether that's your internal stakeholders or that's your potential customers in a new market with an idea. And then you have to give them a way to use their current budgeting process and system to make that purchase. If they don't have a line item for it, it makes it very difficult for them to say yes. There's a difference between the willingness to adopt or buy and the ability. So to me, it's incumbent upon the innovators and the corporates and the sellers to structure and almost productize their offerings in a way that make it easy for people to understand and buy, and then show them that path towards what I call a portfolio-based approach towards innovation, which is you fill the top of the funnel with a whole host of creative ideas. And then you stack rank those ideas, in my view, based on what provides the fastest path to traction with the least amount of time, money, and resources required, with the highest likelihood of really good learning outcomes that could potentially lead to revenue or impact or some combination of those things. And that rubric allows you to stack rank intelligently what you work on, because it's just as important to show that strategic quick win as it is to have long-term success with that, because you want to continue to get the support you need to do that. Then the next step is to identify the problem, the use case, the initial customer profile, which is very different than your long-term customer profile, because an initial customer, it has a different mindset, a successful one. And I always lean on Jeffrey Moore's Crossing the Chasm technology adoption lifecycle approach for this, because I think it's very sound and it's focused on human behavior. And he talks about the 5 communities of humans and how they respond to risk and change. And the key ones that you need to focus on in the early stages are innovators and early adopters. Innovators are product geeks. They love the bright, shiny objects. They're our friends that go out and buy the latest television right when it comes out, or they stand in line for the new Apple device at the store because they're really excited about the latest product. They're willing to take significant risks to do that. So they're fantastic for product feedback, but they're not great long-term customers because you can't keep their attention forever because they're going to be on to the next bright, shiny thing. And organizationally speaking, they don't have a lot of power because they're viewed as risky. So they can't carry you across the proverbial chasm into the mainstream. But who can are early adopters. Early adopters are strategic thinkers. They have a growth mindset. They're willing to go on that journey with you to realize your vision. They agree with that vision. They understand your current reality. And they're willing to give you the 2 things you need the most at this stage of any innovation, which is their time and their truth. Because those are the things that create the learning that lead to the revenue. And those collectively, early adopters and innovators represent about 15% of the market. And it's an individual psychology. You have to uncover and find those people inside of an organization. And there are ways to do that through the course of conversation, where you can identify through their behaviors and their words and their actions whether or not they are an early adopter. And how you approach them is very different than how you would approach the mainstream, because the mainstream doesn't like to take risks. So you need to find people who are willing to take those risks and have a strategic reason for doing business with you. And typically that primary reason is they are looking to maintain or create some sort of competitive advantage, either inside their business or outside of it. And it's important to structure your conversations in a way that uncover those things, because that helps you get where you want to go faster and frame up what a successful relationship would look like. And so we have all of those conversations and get to this place we call proof of market. Just like any really smart startup who's applying the lean methodology would do, is we're not writing a single line of code. We're not fully developing a product until we've vetted out the idea, have a use case, a value proposition, and a hypothetical business model with an initial customer cohort. Once we've done that, then we can properly scope what the MVP would look like. And to me, an MVP is a minimum valuable product, not a minimum viable one. How can I create value with that first version? Get it in their hands, build use cases and case studies, and develop that early cohort of happy customers who are willing to tell the world they're better off with you than without you, because that's the next key step. And then once that's been done, you can leverage that to scale in that area. And then you put the pedal down in that particular area with that customer profile, use case, and business model and feature set. And you do everything in your power to dominate that use case, channel, customer segment, etc. And then what you create through that domination is the credibility to be able to go into adjacent markets and grow this thing in a whole host of different ways over time. And then you repeat that process every time, whether it's the same product to a new market or a new product to the same market or a new product to a new market, as I mentioned before. And that's the portfolio-based approach. And for us, we apply agile teams of product developers and market developers to this process. And so our clients will have us engaged in, 5 different ideas at the same time. And the team composition and makeup will change for every stage based on what's required. And people will roll from one thing to a next. And then we will review these things at every stage gate and decide what we're going to keep doing and what we're going to stop doing or what we're going to make changes around. And to us, that's the portfolio-based approach. And I think that's the future for large corporates if they want to stay out in front and relevant. How we structure it is it's great to have a process, but I think it's just as important to have a framework. And the reason is that you don't know what you don't know until you get out there. So we provide a team comp and a series of stages that allow you to flex people up, down, in, and out based on where you need to spend the most time, based on what you're learning from the market, and take them through that process. And so the team changes for every stage: ideation, validation, market testing, and then you bring in the tech people to build based on what you learn, and then the commercialization folks to scale. Where we see the biggest gap is in, and I'm sure we all know this story, a corporation will hire a McKinsey or a Bain or a Deloitte, and they'll pay them by the slide to tell them what to do for the next 3 to 5 years. I call them PowerPoint engineers. And then they'll turn around with that deck and they'll try to recruit the right people inside their organization to work on this stuff. And they don't have the right folks, or they're not organized for it, or they're not dedicated to it because they're focused on the core business. Or they'll outsource some of it, insource other parts. So they'll bring in a dev shop for one piece. They'll bring in a design agency for something else. They'll bring in a marketing agency for this. They'll bring in strategy and management consultants for this. But they're not coalesced, organized, and dedicated the way that a startup would be. And so we try to fill that gap and teach them that there's a better way to do this. Then I think how you work is really important. You need to have a transparent framework that's constantly sharing your story with your stakeholders. You need a safe space. The old adage of go fast, you need to go alone. There is a time and place for going alone when you're innovating, and especially at the beginning. You can go far later once you've validated that there's proof of market and a real business model and customers. But in the beginning, we ask for a safe space, and you need accountable leaders that are going to be held accountable to the metrics and the outcomes, that are going to give you access to the resources you need within an ecosystem. And that ecosystem is incredibly valuable. Corporations could crush the startup community if they knew how to fast follow correctly, because they have the customers, they have the brand, they have the ecosystem, they have the subject matter expertise, they have the resources at their disposal to fast follow and beat the startups that are getting early adoption in their market. Problem is they don't necessarily have the stage relevant teams to do it the way the startup community does. They're not attracting great entrepreneurs. And so if they did, they could stay out in front of this stuff instead of waiting and overpaying for a successful startup and then bringing that in and then using that to squash their competition. This is typically how we like to structure an innovation team to execute on an idea. And I think this is really powerful because this shows how everything I've been talking about, how you solve that problem and how you manifest it through team comp. So we put a commercialization lead in charge of every effort. That's kind of like the business side CEO or the selling and marketing CEO of the idea. They own the outcomes. They're focused on the business model and the value propositions and managing the relationships with the stakeholders inside the business to get the rest of the team what they need. They're responsible for communicating the story up and making sure that the framework is being followed correctly and people are behaving the right way and in charge of making any necessary pivots. And then underneath that, we put a team together the same way you would in a startup. We have a product team, we have a design team, we have a tech team, and we have a market team. And who's on that team at each stage changes slightly based on what's required, but it allows you to move fast, be agile and flexible in your approach. This speaks to the skill sets that you need when you're taking an idea to market. You need to organize them in the form of product people, technology folks, design folks, and market people. And I can't overstate this enough, and I say this with all respect, but I say this to my corporate friends all the time. If you haven't built a startup before, what are you doing? You don't have the right folks. You're in for a treat. I mean, you have no idea what you're about to go into if you haven't done this. You know, it's being an entrepreneur is like being Andy Dufresne in Shawshank Redemption. You spend 18 years chipping away at the inside of a prison cell, and then you escape only to wade through 400 yards of human feces and chew broken glass to end up on a beach sanding a boat. You know, that's your reward. It's not easy. And most people inside of a large organization don't understand that. And the minute the innovation isn't going the way they want it, they stop managing the innovation and they start managing their career. And they back into the bushes like Homer Simpson and pretend like it never happened. And so building the right digitally native teams is really important. So I've talked a lot. I've got a couple of case studies in here about some of the things we've done to help transform some businesses. I can talk through those if anyone would like me to, but I also feel like it's probably time to summarize and then open this up for folks. So to me, these are the four most important things that any good innovation operating unit needs to have to bring it all together. You need to have stage relevant teams that know what it's like to take something someplace new. You need to have a safe space to build, measure, learn quickly and rapidly and iterate on those things. You need to have fully aligned and accountable stakeholders that understand this approach, know how to measure it, and support you along the way. And then once you've done that and validated that that approach works, you can take a very scalable approach to this. And that's the portfolio approach to innovation. Rapidly iterating on multiple ideas and running them through this framework to find out what works and what doesn't. And that's it for me. I'll open it up to chat at this point.
Sean, this was a fantastic presentation, very complete in terms of the story of ideas to commercialization, the challenges of startups versus corporations, the mindsets of short-term versus long-term, firefighting, the fixed mindset, growth mindset, and then actually how to recognize that you've got to keep on changing as you go through different stages. I like the framework of new product, new market. I like it where it's the same thing that you're doing, but you need to be aware where you are. And I've got a question for you, because our challenge, all of us on this group over here, we're trying to help organizations also do the same thing. But there is a cultural element, which is people grew up either saying, I'm going to be a person who does things on time, on budget, working in corporations. And they don't get fired for that. They don't get fired for taking risk. They get fired for taking risk. And then on the other side, we are asking them to, hey, by the way, there's all this thing about learning metrics, experimentation, trial and error. And they are two different types of people. And we're trying to bring them together. We're trying to bring them together to say, look, we can teach you guys who've got fixed mindsets to kind of understand that this side is different. But the guys on this side also always think the guys on the fixed mindset are kind of useless also. That's not true. Both sides are equally important, because one is making money for now, one is going to make money tomorrow, and we got to blend together. For me, it is balance. Both sides understand it. They understand the other side. It's not that they don't understand it. It's just they can't live it. They're not comfortable with it. They don't wake up feeling safe doing what the other does, vice versa. From your many experiences, you're working with corporates and startups, how are you bridging the conversation between the two leaders on both sides of the equation? The founder, startup leader, the corporate sponsor is supposed to absorb this thing into the organization. How do you get them to see each other's point of view, not say I understand it, but walk the talk on it? And I'll follow with that. And Sean, what I'm going to do is, while I start you up on this question, I'm going to ask the rest of the team to start putting their hands up and ask questions also. So get ready to ask questions. And I'll start this one up, Sean. Great presentation, and it really tickled my brain in every aspect of it. And this is the one I would like you to kind of help me understand. You know, we get it, but it's very hard to make it real.
Yeah. So there's a few fundamental ways to answer this question, and I'll touch on a couple of them. First thing is I'm big on elephant hugging. So there's an elephant in the room. It needs to be hugged. And what you just described, that dynamic, is the big elephant in the room, right? You've got people who've been raised and conditioned in a certain way running a core business. They know they need to innovate. They intellectually understand that these things have to happen, but their behaviors never follow that. And so they have to understand that and acknowledge that they're just as culpable as the founder or the founding team, who's completely the opposite. They're the high risk takers, right? This is a class. I'll use the Jeffrey Moore example again. The innovators and the early adopters are very different than the mainstream, the skeptics and the laggards, right? And so your mainstream people are running the core business, and they're tied more closely to the skeptics and the laggards, and they're risk averse, and they've got the fixed mindsets. So they know in their mind that they're uncomfortable with this, but they don't adopt it in their hearts in a way that allows them to, let's say, trust the process and trust the people. And then on the other side, you've got people who are very frustrated. They want to move fast. They're quick. They'll take risks. They're creative. They don't necessarily love processes the way the large corporation does, which is why we give frameworks. Frameworks allow you to operate within an ever-changing environment. So for us, it's educating both sides and then playing that mediator role and teaching both sides. So teaching the corporation how this is different, why it's different, and how to measure it so that they get to still behave a little bit of, there's some comfort because there's metrics that they can use. They're different metrics, so you got to educate them on that, why they're different, how they're different. And then on the founder side or on the entrepreneurial team side, you have to teach them how to manage expectations, use those metrics to their benefit, and show their work with these quick strategic wins. So that's the broader answer. But how do you operationalize that? Well, you've got to structure this in a way that allows that safe space to happen, and for you to support that effort on the business side as a stakeholder, and add value to it without disrupting it, killing it, or killing the morale of that other team. So it does require a lot of education, and it requires a lot of over communication on both sides and relationship building. It's like in the startup world, co-founders are a married couple. And I found as a VC, the majority of the time I was spending with my portfolio companies was marriage counseling. And it's very similar, right? Because they have they have the same overarching long-term goal, but they have two very different short-term ways of achieving that goal. And so you have to come to some place in the middle, find compromise, give the core business metrics give them a way to measure this in a way that they're comfortable, and make the innovation teams understand that these are table stakes. If you want to play in this world, you've got to provide these things. There is governance, and that governance has to exist.
Very good. Thank you, Sean. We've got a question from Roland from the Philippines. Roland, please turn on your microphone.
Hi, Sean. Thank you very much for this. I've been in the corporate venturing field for, I think, just about 3 years now. And I think this is true also in the East, in the West, in less mature startup ecosystems in the world, corporates, this sort of tug of war with startups and corporates, right? So I have two questions. The first question I have is, do you co-invest and get equity from the startups you build with companies? And second, who do you necessarily talk to? As you mentioned earlier, and as you mentioned, right, some corporations don't know what they don't know, right? Some corporations are not that innovative. Do you talk to them? Do you convince the CEO, or are you, primarily engaging the CEOs who are already ready to build startups?
Yeah, I'll answer the second question first, because to me, there's an easy answer there. And it comes from, again, one of my mentors is a guy named Seth Godin. Many of you probably heard of Seth. And he always taught me that there's two kinds of people in the world when you're marketing or selling, and that there are those that agree with your worldview, and there are those that don't. Seek out those that do and tell them the truth. So practically, from a business model perspective, for me, I focus on those that recognize a need now, share the worldview for two reasons. Number one, it dramatically reduces our sales cycles.
Yeah.
Number two, we have a better, longer lasting, more successful relationship over time. Because as I said before, people can say one thing, but it doesn't mean they're going to do that thing. The core business knows that they have to make these changes. It doesn't mean they're actually going to behave the way you want them to behave. And so you end up entering relationships with people who are constantly working against you, consciously or unconsciously. And then it becomes just a struggle. And frankly, between us at this stage in my life, I don't have to do this. I could just go, play on the ranch. So I'd rather work with people that not just have the ability, but the true willingness in their behaviors to trust this process, this framework, the people, and the outcomes. And when that happens, magic happens. And when it doesn't, it's no fun. And I'm trying to build a global organization of really smart people who want to make an impact. And they want to be able to look at everything they're working on and say, look, I built that. And there's a purpose to that. And at the end of the day, we're in the human capital world, and I want the best human capital. And so I want to be able to look people in the eye with a straight face and be able to sleep at night when I say that you're going to work on really cool things that are going to make a difference. And the people you're working with trust you and believe in you. And so I want to avoid those experiences. And so I'm just very honest about you need to agree with this worldview and our approach. If you don't, it's not going to work. So that's the second question first. The first question second, do we co-invest? So typically no, and here's why. All it does is complicate things.
Okay.
Most corporates don't know how to build ventures, number one, and they certainly don't know how to spin them out and structure them from a capital perspective in a way that in the right way. So they don't have a lot of experience in this. And so the minute they start talking about, you want to take some risk with us, do you want to put some money, do you want to take outside investors, those sorts of things, it brings everything to a grinding halt. And so that's a business model we have chosen to avoid. There are plenty of labs and studios and things out there that like that model and do that model. Although I will tell you, in talking to many of those executive teams and those organizations in the background, without naming names, it's a struggle.
Yeah.
Right? They're having a hard time selling it. They're having a hard time executing. And there are certainly, if you can't sell it and you can't execute it, you're never going to get the return on the equity side anyway. So they end up either evolving towards our model or they evolve into a model where they're just building their own shit. And for us, the only time I will consider it is once we've gotten through past the proof of market stage and into full commercialization. Once we've been able to get to full commercialization at the end of our stage and these people want to spin it out, and at that point, we call that the transition point, where either we're going to continue to support and grow a team to run this business alongside you, or we're going to transition it back in, or if you want to spin it out, here are the ways you can spin it out. If we really believe in it, the partners in my business, we'll put some money in, but that's personal money. And that's how we do it, because I just don't want to deal with it otherwise. Because it just,
do you do some milestone based sort of payment every stage, or do you just do retainers?
No. You mean our business model?
Yeah.
So we are fee for service, and it's project based, and it's based on the team composition and the time.
Okay.
So we don't do hourly. We don't get involved. We don't do staff aug. I'll do staff aug for a strategic reason. If a client says, look, I want to work with you long term, right now I need two designers to help me with this existing project, and I feel like I want to build a relationship with this business, I will do that. But 90% of the time, that's not how we do it. And then every stage in our methodology has a fee and a timeline attached to it. I very much productize this, as I mentioned before, because there is a way to predict a lot of the stuff, because I've seen the movie so many times. I can tell you with an 80 to 90% degree of certainty that this is how this is going to go. And so it's easy for me to plan and budget for that and then give a price. Where it then gets custom is once it hits the market, and now you start to learn from the market and you really learn what they actually need. Now you can scope out the future. I can't tell you what 6 months is going to look like, but I can tell you what the first 3 months are going to look like, and then the next 3, and then the 3 after that. I can give you a good framework of, if you take a portfolio-based approach, you're going to spend $1 to $3 million a year on on an idea if it gets to fruition, right? I can do that, but I hope that answers your question.
Yes,
Sean,
thank you very much, Sean.
if I can just comment on what you just said, our experience is that when you mix business models together, business model of a consulting firm to a business model of a venture capital firm, it doesn't work very well.
Agreed.
The consultant must make the money now, and they're putting the hours and times, and then they're giving up control on the execution to somebody else, and so it's up to somebody else. A venture capitalist, on the other hand, is also capturing his money now, usually, because he is a partner. He's using the fund to pay his salary.
Yeah.
Because he uses the fund to pay his salary, he's taking no risk at all. So he's getting paid also. So as long as you're collecting your money now, then you're probably going to do okay. But if you don't collect your money now, then you are like all the investors, financial investors, who are basically hoping somebody else will make money for them.
I couldn't have said it better. You're 100% correct, which is why I structured my fund model the way I did, because I knew my companies needed help. So my LPs basically said, I would rather let you give this company $1 million, put 500 in cash, and then I want you to pay a team of people I know, like, and trust who will give me insights into the future of this thing. The other 500 to actually do all the business development, marketing, and product market fit work for them and de-risk the idea for me. And that's why we structured our funds that way. So it behaved a lot more like private equity, even though it was venture, for that reason.
Very good, Sean. We got another question from Cristanto, and then we'll have another one from Bob Schultz. Cristanto, you're on mute. We can't hear you. Cristanto, you're on mute. We cannot hear you.
Hi, Sean. I'm Cristanto from Indonesia. I'm in agreement with you on 90% of what you said and your business model, everything. But here's the reality now in Indonesia. We are opening up. We are trying to do innovation. We just do a lot of big regulation, big things, legislation, everything, to make our research centers, that is 85% of them are owned by the government, to open up and work with the private, collaborate, offering facilities and their brain, blah, blah, blah. Okay. One thing that you mentioned that I don't have the answer is, how do you bring these engineers and human beings to be together, which is, I think, is very interesting, because that's our main problem. Meaning that we are very much techno-driven, science-driven, and don't recognize markets. So that's a problem.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
Please.
Yeah, I agree. So there are two ways to do this. The long-term way is to continue to educate as early as you can the engineers on the value of talking to humans, and focusing on problems over products, right? That should be inculcated into society as a whole, number one. The short-term way to do it is to train people like me to work with them. So you've got half the society is left brain and half of it's right brain, just to make it up, right? So you've got you've got the left-brained engineers, and you've got the right-brained entrepreneurs and sellers, and let's say extroverts. So it's not difficult to train the extroverts how to work alongside the introverts in a team-based approach, so that the extroverts own the market development and create the product market feedback loop work to prioritize what the customers want over what the product people think they need. And then you educate both sides on how to work together towards that. So we call it a closed product market feedback loop, and it's actually one of the things we functionally put into place. Every Friday afternoon, our teams, the head of commercialization and the head of product get together, and the head of commercialization feeds the top 3 things that the customers are asking for that they don't have into the product team's hands, and they have to prioritize those things. And if they do, it works well. If they don't, it doesn't. Again, it's much like that messed up marriage counseling situation. But that's the best way to do it. We have to train our sales and marketing professionals and business professionals on stage relevant go-to-marketing and how to work with engineering teams to solve problems for customers. That's what I did at GrowthX Academy, right? We literally built that program to teach people how to work with engineers to solve that problem.
Sean,
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Just want to share with you a question which you don't have to answer right now. I'm going to give the floor next to Bob Schultz. I'm going to plant the seed now. I used to work in Motorola, and we developed cell phones, we developed satellites, we developed batteries, we did everything. And we didn't go outside as much. We all thought NIH, not invented here, was a big thing about us. We were supposed to be the smartest guys on the planet. And we did that. We were able to produce things, maybe not at the pace that we were expected, perhaps, but we did it. We did it really well. My question to you is, now with all the business schools, all the business books, all the venture capitalists, all the startups are formed, telling stories on how to do it, have you truly seen a real increase in more unicorns, in more successful businesses, more product launches, or are we still stuck with something? There's another X factor that nobody has figured out yet, and which has increased the number of productivity of innovation?
Yeah, so a great question. The failure rate of startups hasn't changed in 50 years. And in fact, if anything, it's going up. There are more product launches, but there's less traction. Because we live in the age of applied technology where most things aren't defensible, most stuff is software, there's low code, no code solutions. It's never been easier or cheaper to get products into market, but it's also never been more difficult or expensive to get traction for those in the market. Because once again, people are focused on themselves and their ideas. They're not focused on their customers and their problems. The most successful EIRs that I've seen in Silicon Valley, for example, are people who they exit a deal, they go work on a stipend for a period of time, for an indeterminate period of time for a fund. And their whole job is to go out and find a really big problem that they think they can solve really well in a market that's big enough for anybody to care about. And they're not wedded to an idea or a market or a segment or a sector or a product or anything, right? And those folks get that. They may not have started that way, but that's how they end up. And their failure rate is incredibly lower than everybody else's. Most people start a company because they've fallen in love with an idea. And that's them and their idea. It's not what the market needs. They don't go out and recognize a big problem and then try and solve it. They fall in love with their own thing. And so then their journey ends up often in the same place. They spend 80% of their time on their product and their technology when they need to spend 80% of their time on the markets, the customers, and the problems. And that hasn't fundamentally changed because everything that Silicon Valley's shown the world to be in the last 30, 40 years is romanticized to the degree that people think that this shit's easy. It's not. I grew up in the Valley. I grew up in this stuff. My father built all the plants for Intel and ran manufacturing there for 30 years. I was fortunate enough to grow up in dining rooms with Andy Grove and Bob Noyce and Gordon Moore and Craig Barrett and Paul Otolini and Mike Splinter and my dad, Bill Sheppard, and all these guys talking about all this stuff and going through this stuff in a really intense way, and seeing how they did it, right? And all those guys left Fairchild Semiconductor because Fairchild wouldn't let them innovate, ironically. And they go and start Intel and create the first microprocessor. So I've seen how this works. It's a lot harder than people say. The Shawshank example is there for a reason. So people just throw their ideas out there. They build something. They try to get customers, but they're not willing to do what's necessary to make that happen. And oftentimes, for example, I'd never invested in solo founders. I invested in co-founding teams because I needed stuff. I need a tech person. I told you that. That tech person needs me. The problem is they don't recognize that. They don't understand it. They don't see the value in it until it's too late. And that's what started this whole journey for me to begin with. I was tired of getting emails from entrepreneurs going, "Oh, we're shutting down the company because we ran out of money." And I would say, "No, you pissed away what I gave you on the wrong stuff." And that is the fundamental problem, and that's why nothing has changed, because society doesn't recognize the importance of sales. It needs to be elevated to its rightful place in society along being an engineer or a doctor or a lawyer. Well, not a lawyer, but you get my point.
All right, let's not beat up the lawyers in the room, but they are the NO. They are the NO of innovation usually. So absolutely. So with that, Bob, do you want to go next? Ask your question. Then Larissa, I see your hand up also. Okay. I think.
Sure, Sean. I checked out here, and I'm just looking. You and I have 19 common connections on LinkedIn. One of which is Doug Holt, who's a former EMBA student of mine. I know him well. So I've got two questions. One is, how do we connect you, Jimmy, Doug Holt, and me and go and make a difference? And number two is, I look at other things that you've been involved with for the last 20 years or so, once you gave up playing professional golf or teaching other people. One is junior achievement, the Green Foundation, Catholic Charities, and I've got dots that want to go together with your dots. How do we do it?
Let's have a conversation.
Well, there we go. So so my email's on there. I sent, if you go on the online and put my phone number, my email, let's do a Zoom.
Yeah, my email for everybody, it's Sean, SEAN, at the letter U dot plus, PLUS. Anybody who wants to connect or have a follow-on conversation, shoot me a note. SEAN at the letter U dot PLUS. I'll also share this deck with Erla, and she can distribute it to the group. And you can also contact Erla to get in touch with me as well.
Thanks.
Happy to have any of those conversations.
So Bob and the rest of the GIMI team, Sean has been in conversation with Erla and trying to figure out how we can do more things together. And so this was a chance for Sean to actually share what he had. You guys to see him, Sean to see who we are also. And it's just it's again, 1 + 1 has to be 3. Together we can kind of conversations. So Sean, fantastic that this is already started as a conversation. We have a question from Ben Sibilka. Ben's got his hand up, and Ben's actually driving a startup right now within a company, and so he's facing all the issues right now.
Ben, did I hear Guatemala when you introduced yourself?
Yes, I'm from Guatemala.
So I'm on the board of Antigua Forum.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Do you know the Antigua Forum?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not too involved with them, but I've heard of them. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a freedom accelerator, and we run a program in Antigua, Guatemala every year for freedom-based policymakers around the world who are trying to get their ideas adopted.
That is awesome.
And I also am involved with UFM and speak there, and Gabrielle, who's been the president for many years. But anyway, I've also got some great team members on our commercialization team in Europe that are Guatemalan natives and UFM.
No way.
Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna shoot you an email I definitely want to connect. But I have a philosophical question for you.
Those are my favorite.
So, first of all, just thank you so much. It was super inspiring. So you want to make a big impact on the world. Obviously, this is sort of your underlying purpose. And at some point, you started out on the entrepreneurship journey, then you moved in sort of the VC world, and then you moved into this corporate side. At some point, I guess you have to make a decision, or you've had to make a decision as to how much energy you're going to put in to helping corporates. You've built systems that are scalable, right? So you have a system to help startups be more effective and a system to help corporates be more effective at innovating. But they're very different business models, as you mentioned, and very different systems. Philosophically, do you like spending more energy, and do you feel there's more impact to be made nurturing the system that helps corporates become more effective, or nurturing the system that helps startups be more effective? And I'm going to mix the question a little bit with your business models, because they're very different business models in terms of the long-term returns. If you have equity stake in the startup side versus you don't have equity stake in the other one. So how do you manage that tension between those two ways of changing the world?
So I feel like I have done, I spent the last 10 years, working from home. I got a dog with several dogs. My daughter's in our study abroad program at the University of Glasgow, and she left us with the dogs for the semester. So I spent the last 10 years figuring out a way to help startups scale, right? So the GrowthX and GrowthX Academy programs are online, and they're helping tens of thousands of entrepreneurs around the world. So I feel like I've checked that box to a certain degree, and it's there. And since human behavior is never going to change, my methodology is not going to change. So it's there and it works, and that's helpful. My work with the Antigua Forum is my way of trying to do it with governments, because here's what I found, right? Like there's 3 ways to really there's 3 kinds of constituencies that can really make change, right? There's governments, there's corporations, and then there's entrepreneurs. And so I've done my piece with entrepreneurs. I think I've given that there. I'm always going to be involved in it, but I've, blood, sweat, and tears of a decade of building that program to get it to where it is, to where it can help as many people as possible, because I can't scale myself. I've started down the government path, and I think we all know where that goes. But that's still out there. And then corporates are the other, because those are the 3 most powerful constituencies in the world to me. And so each one of them I feel like I can affect. And right now, I think the corporate thing, also selfishly, the timing has never been better. The pandemic has accelerated digital transformation. It's top of mind for everybody. It's time for a new approach to scale innovation. I think we've got a unique and novel way of doing that. I have very big plans for U+, like I've had for everything else. And we're just really at the, in the first inning of a 9-inning game. But after that, then I feel like I can get to, once I've finished this corporate journey, I think I can get to the global public policy affect, right? World Economic Forum, UN, Foundation for Economic Freedom, you name it. I mean, I'm involved with a lot of these things on the periphery. Horasis, I get, I do things for them and I love it. Of course, I've been a part of the Grameen Foundation for 20 years. Microfinance to me is a big deal. Antigua Forum is a big deal. Junior achievement and anything that supports entrepreneurship at the earliest ages are a big deal. Teaching professional selling to 5-year-olds to me is a big deal. So all of that's the early childhood development Abecedarian project. So I mean, my mind, and is a great question because that's exactly how I think about it. And you just need to affect the power structures. And you need to do what you can to impact those in a scalable way. And right now, I think for me, my greatest impact comes from my capitalistic approach towards solving problems. And the bigger the capitalist I become, the bigger impact I can make on the world, personally, because that's my superpower.
Sean, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sean, as I was listening, I just wanted to make sure we connect dots in our conversations also. GIMI, Global Innovation Management Institute, has got like probably about 4 segments it's pushing on to democratize innovation. And one is in corporations. We have a framework by which we can help companies go to level 1 maturity, level 2, level 3, level 4. And in each one is increasing ability to get ideas from everywhere, increasing ability to form teams rapidly, increase ability to resource properly, partnering mindsets, and bigger and bolder outputs from those corporations. So we got that focusing on corporations, and we have certified about 1,000 companies to date. And the idea is to take that to 10,000 to 100,000 in the future. So that's one place where some of the frameworks that you have might be interesting to integrate into the conversation. The second one we have is individuals, where we train individuals on how to take ideas to commercialization, and then teach them how to manage teams of people who do that. And so Chief Innovation Officer is an end state. First start with I, then to managing others. And there's another set of certificates out there, and about 10,000 certificates of those types have been issued over the last couple of years. And so we're hitting those numbers. And then we work with governments also, government entities. And we say, you governments, and usually not in the US or countries where governments don't change a lot. So now you got to, it looks like a corporation again, and there's bureaucracy in there. And so we're helping them also create innovation systems to innovate the government, the future of police, the future of the fire department, the future of water utilities, the future of whatever. And we drive that also on that front. The one place where we have kind of stayed away from, Sean, is I've been teaching in business schools for the last many years. And every year, if I ask my incoming MBA students, hey, how many of you want to be an entrepreneur? They all put their hand up on the first day. All of them. I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to be like Bill Gates or Steve Jobs or somebody else.
Yeah.
And when I ask on the last day, how many of you guys have got your business started? Most of them got their hands down and said, how many of you are looking for a job? And they all want to look for a job. But in between the first day and the day they graduate, they come to me with business plans after business plans after business plans. And I always tell them, guys, quit school, start your business. If you really think it's real, you'll start it, right? You don't need business school to help you get through this stuff. And what I found was helping that community, and I'm gonna label that whole community as MBA types, startup types, is really a journey of throwing grass seeds out there and hoping a flower will pop out of there, right? It's just something I don't know, but it doesn't happen easily, and it's not common. And so we have not paid attention deliberately on the startup side of entrepreneurship, even though we can access MBA students. We have a network of 110 business schools around the world. And we help with those schools also. And we have tried to stay away from saying MBA program should be teaching entrepreneurship, but not expecting results from entrepreneurship. Let them do it. Let them go work somewhere. Let them get pissed off at the boss. And then they'll start a company when they've got enough money or something else to be able to survive that valley that they've got to go through to go from one side to the other side. So I'm really interested at some point, maybe we can talk about that, Sean, to think about it. But I think we got parallel things. In Guatemala, we've been there, Guatemala 2000, 10X Guatemala, and we've done a lot of things there too. And probably the same people are running in our circles, and they're probably overlapping us. So it'd be good to connect further. I'm going to keep on seeding this conversation. Antonio, you have a question. Antonio is a futurist. He can see the future before you and I can. Go, Antonio.
No, I don't have I just know some tools, let's put it like this, and I have some experience. Thank you very much, Sean. I know it's already a long interaction, but I had two questions about the future. Yes, so a little bit in your different frameworks. One is about market needs. So I would like very much to hear you a little bit about if there's a difference, or how do you deal with current market needs and future market needs? Because there's a difference, I would say, when you're working in innovation. And if this is a question, or if there's something we deal with it naturally, or if we just focus on current market needs, or if there's a way of finding emergent that maybe are still not the mainstream way of a mainstream characteristic of the demand side, but its dynamics might bring new things into the future. And the other one was about ranking the ideas, and it's a similar question. Is about, okay, when you talk about higher revenues potential and likelihood of winning, I know there are then sub-criteria within those two probably, but I would like to, the question is about time. So do you sometimes also define quick wins and long-term or not, or just, I would like, this is just I would like to hear a little bit about the timing component of the process.
I mean, so I always prioritize quick wins and current need for two primary reasons. I mean, the biggest reason is that you've got to demonstrate to the stakeholders that this approach works as quickly as you can, if you're going to get long-term support. There's a very strategic reason for prioritizing leading metrics, let's call them. Things that demonstrate to the powers that be that this approach will deliver a return. Because that's always, in the back of everyone's mind, if not the forefront, whether they say it or not. So you've got to prove to them that this works. So that's on the innovation operating model perspective. If you're at the lab level, and you're thinking about this, say, in the horizon approach, right? H1, H2, H3, then you have to have a different vision and a different set of goals and a different way of measuring that, and then therefore a different way of supporting it. And all of that needs to be laid out up front. So if somebody comes to me, so for example, we've got a global university where we are commercializing 70 some pieces of intellectual property. And so the very first stage was to do prioritization and then bucket those things. All right, where's their current market need? Where's their future market need? And where's I have no freaking idea. Right? And then you have that conversation and you set the expectations of here's how this plays out for each one of these. And so you can make the decision, but we're going to show you how this movie plays and what the endings will look like. And then you can decide how you want to invest. And then from there, we'll structure what that framework looks like, what the timelines are, what resources are required to do it. The number one step in our entire methodology is always resource review. What do you have and what do you need, right? from roles, responsibilities, expertise, capital, time, tools, people, you name it. We build a roadmap of all the resources that you currently have and what are required to create and support that functional learning organization. And then that frames a discussion, because we create out of all of that a market milestone that says, this is what we want to accomplish over the next period of time. And it has to be achievable based on the resources that you have, not on what you want to happen. And we apply this to startups or to corporates or to universities or to governments, it doesn't matter. And so that sort of reveals how you deal with long-term needs versus short-term needs versus pie in the sky moonshot stuff. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yes, yeah. I'm although I work in foresight, let's put it like this.
Right.
When I work in between foresight and innovation, there are many projects that you can call it anyway, but they have both components. It's very important to have the quick wins as part of well, especially in corporations. I'm more focused on. I'm not thinking innovation in corporations. That's more. I also work with startups, but actually in the government side. But in the corporations, when you have a portfolio of innovations that you are studying, it's very, very important in order to gain traction to have the quick wins. But also it can be very interesting in terms of positioning the corporation to have more long-term ambitions, more on the edge, let's put it like this. Maybe in terms of also to gain within the organization to have a strong statement of the innovation side of the company. Yeah,
and so I know we got a couple of minutes left, but in any of these R&D lab environments with Horizon 3 and future stuff, and I'll use blockchain as a perfect example. I've made 2 blockchain investments. Why? Because those are the only 2 with a current business model. We know what it's going to do long term. We know what DeFi is going to do. We know that these things are happening. It's the old Gates adage of change takes 10 years longer than you think, but when it comes, it's 100 times larger and more impactful. So my first stage gate with any of this future, the future stuff, and I don't want to minimize it by using those words, but I know how important it is. And I love talking to futurists. You guys blow my mind. Is what's the business or impact model? Right? And when is it? Because without that, it won't have life. And so to me, I'm very practical about it, because execution is the #1 reason why any of this stuff fails. And if we don't execute, it never has a chance. And so we've got to have an execution mindset, an execution approach to it, and then the resources to do that and a way to measure it. And that's sort of fundamentally how we think about it.
Sean.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you.
Of course.
Yeah, Sean, great set of presentation, conversations, dialogue, and arguments and discussions and all good stuff that goes with that. I believe we have a like-minded group. Loved what you were saying. I think we learned a lot from it also. And I think there are opportunities for collaboration with us, with different people on the team with you to go further. So I'll ask Ariel to maybe set up, if you're okay, set up a meeting with me also, so we can talk a little bit further, and then make sure we can see some things for 2022, and help each other scale up and do whatever we need to do together. I think we learned a lot. I think our network learned a lot. We really appreciate you coming so early in the morning from your vacation, I think, in Montana, and I'm glad we made the connections. Thank you very much, Sean. Great talk.
My pleasure, everyone. This was a fabulous discussion. Thank you for all the wonderful, thoughtful questions. As I said, anybody who wants to connect and talk further, just hit me up.